The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, Behold my maid Bilhah. Go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 through 3. Chapter 1. Night. It began in a place meant for joy, once echoing with cheers and the squeak of sneakers. Now it was where they slept, women lined up on army cots in a former gymnasium. The floor, still varnished and etched with fading court lines, bore the memory of games long ended. Above, the basketball hoops hung in silence, their nets gone, like missing punctuation at the end of a sentence. She could almost smell the past. Sweat from the players, bubble gum, cheap perfume, a ghostly collage of girlhood rituals. Back then, they wore felt skirts, then miniskirts, then pants, hair spiked or streaked in defiance. It had all unfolded here. Dances spun under disco balls, music like a haunting echo clinging to the walls. The mirrored globe had once cast light like snow. But now, even the light felt weighed down by memory. That room had known sex and waiting, both old and shapeless. She recalled the ache, the edge of wanting something undefined but deeply necessary, the sense that everything important was just about to happen. They yearned, not just for touch or escape, but for something ahead, the future. It shimmered. How had they all become so ravenous for it? In this new life, the yearning hadn't vanished. It merely hovered, thin and stubborn as breath. Each woman had a cot, placed just far enough from the next to stifle conversation. They were given flannelette sheets, like children, and blankets labeled with the faded memory of a country's initials. U.S. aunts patrolled the rows, not mothers or friends, but figures armed with cattle prods, fastened to leather straps like relics of control. Guns were forbidden even to them. Guns belonged to others, the angels, standing guard outside the chain-link fence, their backs always turned, and even so, the women watched them, hoped for a glance. Imagined negotiations that could change everything. They still had one thing left, their bodies, the trade of last resort. In the shadowed room, they trained their mouths to form words without sound, learned to whisper without being caught. When no one watched, they reached across the spaces between beds, fingers brushing, some fragile proof of connection. Silent names were passed bed to bed. Alma, Janine, Dolores, Moira, June, each name a small resistance, a declaration that they were still there, still themselves. Chapter 2. Shopping. The room is spare, almost devotional in its simplicity. A chair, a table, and a single ceiling lamp beneath a plaster relief shaped like a wreath, though its center has been filled in like a blank, forgotten eye. Once, perhaps, a chandelier hung there, but now any anchor point is gone, erased, just like the opportunity for escape. Curtains stir faintly by the partially open window, letting in filtered sunlight and a whisper of fresh air. Beneath the window, a cushion on a narrow seat. The floor glows with polish, wood worn smooth, holding the scent of effort and order. A braided rug lies at the center, fashioned from scraps and care. It speaks of utility disguised as art, history disguised as home. Nothing unnecessary remains. On the wall, a print, pale blue irises behind no glass. Even beauty here is cautious. Each woman may have the same. Same chair, same print, same pressed curtains. Sameness is safety. The bed is a boundary, not of comfort, but of control. Thought, too, is rationed. Too much of it, and one risks slipping into forbidden places, inward exits. Even the window glass is reinforced against the temptation of despair. Yet, despite the constraints, there are traces of the world that once was. This could be mistaken for a guest room or an old-fashioned boarding house, until one listens to the silence, until one notices what's missing. She dresses in red. Gloves, shoes, sleeves, the long gathered skirt. A deep, undeniable red. She fastens the veil prescribed to shield her face, not for modesty, but to render her invisible. She carries a basket and walks through hallways wrapped in dusty pink runners, past furnishings dulled by time but still clinging to former grace. The descent down the stairs reflects more than movement. It's ritual, routine wrapped in red fabric. In the kitchen, Rita kneads bread. Her arms, her apron, the smell of flour. These things remind one that hands still do familiar work, even in unfamiliar times. Words are sparse, stiff. Suspicion is draped over every sentence. Yet under it all simmers a hunger, not just for food or touch, but for connection, for something unspoken and tender. Chapter 3. The Garden, the Wife, and the Threshold. She stepped quietly through the back door, into a garden tamed and symmetrical. The lawn stretched neatly across the middle, daffodils withdrawing as tulips emerged, scarlet, almost bruised where stem met bloom, like wounds sealed too slowly. The garden belonged to the commander's wife, always had. From her room, she had seen the wife there, knees nestled into a cushion, a veil floating over her broad-brimmed hat, shears resting in a basket beside her. It wasn't the wife who pulled weeds or turned soil. A guardian did the labor. The wife only pointed, her stick more a wand than a tool. She remembered her own garden once, hands deep in earth, pockets full of dry seeds, fingers curled around damp bulbs. There had been solace in that slowness, in nurturing something. Now, she envied the wife her simple tasks, tying stems, arranging, knitting scarves, perhaps not for soldiers, but for no one. Elaborate, aimless designs, boy and girl, tree and eagle. Maybe they unraveled them, re-knit, and unraveled again. Still, the act of doing was its own reward. They rarely spoke. The wife treated her like a necessity, an intrusion wrapped in red fabric. It had been 5 weeks since their first meeting. 5 weeks since she stood uncertain at the front door, escorted by a guardian and weighed down by an over-literal bag. The door had opened before he knocked. She had expected a Martha. Instead, powder blue robes filled the doorway. So, you're the new one. The wife hadn't stepped back. She made it clear. This house wasn't hers until granted. Only after the car pulled away did she permit her inside, with a limping turn and a single command. Inside the sitting room, the wife perched with a cushion underfoot and a cigarette between her lips. She lit it with practiced hands. The sight of contraband, of black market indulgence, sparked some small flicker of hope. Maybe rules bent quietly here. They spoke stiffly. A transaction, a placement, her third posting. She wasn't asked to sit, but was allowed. A rare exception. The wife's eyes, pale and hard, gave nothing. Her mouth spoke restraint. Her body jewelry and posture and contained fury. "You're not a Martha," she snapped. She didn't want to be addressed, didn't want to acknowledge her at all. The silence stretched. She watched the woman in front of her, the curve of her hair beneath her veil, the two blue eyes, the rehearsed polish. There was something familiar. Then it hit her. She had seen her as a child, early Sundays, flipping channels in her mother's study, watching the Growing Souls Gospel Hour. Back then, she had been Serena Joy, a soprano, a performer. She could cry and smile at once while singing to a God that watched and, perhaps, never answered. Now, here she sat, voice muted, cigarette smoldering, a wife, a warning, worse than imagined. Chapter 4. Walkers in Red. The gravel path slices through the back lawn, straight and deliberate, like a parting in hair. Rain from the night before has left the grass damp on either side, the air heavy with moisture, rich with the scent of Earth's quiet fertility. Past the picket gate and onto the driveway, she notices one of the guardians, Nick, polishing the commander's car. It's sleek and black, the kind of black that signifies either power or a funeral. He's absorbed in the task, cloth in hand, chamois stroking chrome like it's something to be loved. This ritual, at least, has survived, the way men worship machines. Nick wears his uniform with irreverent ease, sleeves rolled, cap askew, a cigarette at the edge of his mouth. That, too, is a sign. Contraband has its own social economy. He lives in the garage, low status, no woman assigned. Yet he wears his detachment like armor, casual, unsupplicant. Perhaps that's his rebellion. Or a disguise. She watches too long. He notices. A wink, a puff, the cigarette stub crushed beneath his heel. A violation in gesture, a signal of something. Interest? Defiance? A test? Head lowered beneath her white wings, she walks on. Reporting him is an option. So is wondering what he might smell like in summer heat, tobacco and sweat and sun. Out through the front gate, she focuses on the brick sidewalk, red and uneven from years of frost. The landscape beneath her feet holds more certainty than the one in her mind. She waits at the corner. Waiting, she remembers, used to rankle. But Aunt Lydia called it a form of service. They also serve who only stand and wait, she'd recited, voice coiling around metaphors of seeds and roots, of blooming and withering. Another woman appears, another flash of red. They peer through their tunneled hoods, verifying one another. The ritual greeting is exchanged. Blessed be the fruit. May the Lord open. They walk 2 by 2 as decreed, a rule dressed as protection, but everyone knows the truth. Each watches the other. If one should slip, the other must catch and report. Her partner, Offred, is new. The previous one vanished quietly, unremarked. Offred is slightly rounder, walks like something trained, with short, obedient steps. She says only what's permitted. Perhaps she believes. Perhaps not. There's no safe way to know. As they walk, Offred murmurs, updates. Rebels defeated, good weather sent, praise be. She nods in rhythm, hungry for news, even if it's polished or false. Scraps are scraps. They reach the checkpoint. It looks like a simple barrier, striped like construction scaffolding. But beyond it lie the unseen. Guards in pillboxes, floodlights poised for violence. Memory sharpens. Last week, a woman shot near this very spot. A Martha. Too slow to find her pass. Assumed to be something she wasn't. Inside the kitchen walls, Rita and Cora had discussed her. Doing their job, one had said. Nothing safer than dead, the other replied. Now, as they approach the 2 boyish guardians at the gate, youth in green uniforms, too fresh-faced to trust, she tightens inward. They are the most dangerous, not because of strength, but because of belief. She walks through with care. Because in this world, being careful is not a virtue, it's survival. Rita's voice lingered in her mind, resentful, weary. It was quick, Cora had said. I'd choose time, Rita replied. Time to set things right. Words exchanged over dishes and heat, but they pressed like breath on her neck as she walked. The young guards at the checkpoint saluted, 3 fingers raised in mimicry of respect for what she represented, not for who she was. Their gestures were practiced, their faces still too soft for the roles they played. She retrieved her identification pass from a hidden sleeve pocket. They inspected it mechanically. One stepped into the pillbox to feed her numbers into a cold machine. Routine, precise, ordinary. But then, the smallest fracture in that order. One of them, peach-mustached, long-faced, lowered his eyes to meet hers. She offered him the moment, tilting her chin just enough. Their eyes locked, brief and startling. And he blushed, a color blooming where none was allowed. She studied him. Pale skin stretched like paper over youth. The mournful length of his face reminded her of something domesticated and foolish, like a sheep or a spaniel. Yet for one absurd, vivid second, she imagined touching him. Just skin, just defiance. He was the one who turned away. The moment was over, yet she stored it like contraband, a sweetness, like childhood candy hidden in a drawer. The memory of possibility, so small it might pass unnoticed, yet so vital it could be clutched for days. What if she returned one night with no one to see? What if the wings fell back, the red robe peeled away under the flicker of checkpoint lanterns? She knew what he might imagine as he stood there, hour after hour, watching the parade of duty-laden figures file past. Only commanders and wives in black and blue passed here freely, their dignity clad in silent cars. Martas trudged in green. Red-cloaked handmaids walked under watchful eyes. Sometimes, the black vans came. No license plates, only the winged eye on the side. Opaque windows, men in mirrored glasses, a silence so unnatural it screamed. Everyone looked away from the vans. If there were screams or thumps inside, they weren't heard. If they thought of kisses, they were immediately followed by the image of searchlights, sirens, gunshots. Better not to think. Better to recite protocol and dream of advancement, to angel rank, a wife, a child, a handmaid eventually, if deemed worthy. The man with the peach mustache opened the pedestrian gate with quiet formality, stepping far aside. As she passed, she felt his gaze trailing behind. It wasn't permission, but it was something. And so, she let herself sway. Slightly, the fabric of her red skirt catching the air and curling around her like smoke. It was a rebellion so small, it might as well have been invisible. Yet, it thrilled her. She shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have weaponized her walk. Shouldn't have teased men who knew only denial. But then again, why not? There was a power in it. A dangerous, passive power, like holding a treat beyond a dog's reach. She was the forbidden, the sacred, the profane. Let them ache. Let them twist in their sheets at night, stifled and dreaming of what they cannot touch. There were no more printed women, no films, no fantasies permitted. Only this, her, a silhouette behind linen wings, walking just beyond reach. She walked on, her shadow long and solid in the dust. Behind her, 2 boys stood rigid at attention, still, yet very much alive. Chapter 5. Walkers, Watchers, and the Weight of What Was. Doubled, she walks, her red twin beside her, as if her shadow had become flesh. They have stepped beyond the commander's grounds, but not outside the surveillance of the world they now belong to. The houses here are still stately, lawns trimmed, facades pristine. They might be images from old magazines, homes and gardens, glossy spreads, captured just before time stalled. No children play on these sidewalks. No footsteps echo within the curtained windows. The stillness is profound, eerie. This place is preserved, not lived in. A street from a museum, a model town, but emptied. It's Gilead's center, the eye of a storm so tightly wound that nothing dares move. She remembers walking here once with Luke, years ago. They dreamed about buying one of these old houses, a garden, swings, children. The fantasy was always just out of reach, but having the dream was once a kind of wealth. Now that memory drifts like a feather caught in air that no longer carries it. On the main street, women filter past in measured pairs, reds like hers, greens for the Marthas, stripes for the Econo wives, those who do it all, if they can. Occasionally, someone in black, a widow, rarer now, and the commander's wives, always behind glass. She keeps her gaze low, stepping carefully between sidewalk cracks like a superstitious child. But inside, she's remembering. The feel of running shoes, the rules women carried like charms. Don't answer the door. Don't stop for strangers. Don't linger alone. Freedom then was rough and unkempt. Freedom too, Aunt Lydia used to say. Now they're told they are blessed with freedom from harm, from danger, from desire. But it doesn't feel like safety. It feels like airless quiet. Ahead is a shop marked by a golden lily. It used to be a movie theater once. She remembers the Bogart festivals, the button-down shirts, the promise held in undone fabric. Women in those films made choices. Now, choice is fossilized. They don't enter the shop. Instead, they cross to milk and honey. The sign shows symbols only, no tempting words. There's a line. 2 by 2, they wait. An orange catches her eye, startling in its brightness, like a forbidden sun. She has no tokens for it, but she'll tell Rita. A small rebellion through a small reward. Inside, the guards record their purchases. The room buzzes with rustling cloth and quick glances. This is where someone from the before might be seen. A flicker of a known face could lift the weight for a second. And then, there she is. A handmaid enters, pregnant, gloriously, undeniably so. Gasps ripple through the room. They try not to gape, but it's impossible. The sight fills the space like perfume spilled in still air. Her body becomes monument. She glows. She knows. She came to be seen. Whispers name her. Of Warren. Janine. One of Aunt Lydia's favorites from the center. And as she passes, her eyes meet those of the narrator. A smirk. A knowing glance at the flatness beneath red robes. Once again, the unspoken burns louder than words. They move on to all flesh, marked with a wooden pork chop. Meat, scarce, precious. She thinks of the Marthas, their hunger for details about other homes. A whole ecosystem of rumor and judgment clings to these scraps. She wraps her chicken in butcher paper, tied with string. No plastic now. She remembers the clutter of old supermarket bags. Guilt and carelessness wrapped in polyethylene. Luke would worry, even then. She could get one over her head, he warned. Now, even memory can sting. Outside again, she catches her reflection in a storefront. They are back on the street, back in step. And coming toward them is something strange. Tourists. Tiny, immaculately dressed, eyes wide and bright with curiosity. Japanese, perhaps. Visiting artifacts in a museum of living women. Cameras poised, heads tilted, cheerfulness wrapped in politeness. But it feels like a sting. She stares. It's hard not to stare when you've become the relic on display. She froze, transfixed by the unfamiliar shapes of the women walking toward her. Legs exposed, thinly sheathed in translucent stockings, skirts that ended just below the knee. So much skin visible, so much movement allowed. Their heels were high and thin, like stilts too slender to support real weight. Footwear as ornament, not utility. Their backs arched unnaturally, heads uncovered, hair free. Unbound darkness framing crimson mouths lined with lipstick. It was bold. It was obscene. It was beautiful. She had once looked like them, had once been them. That knowledge sat inside her like something sharp that had dulled over time. Once, this had been freedom. Now, the very sight of it made her draw inward. Offred had also stopped. Together, they stared, fascinated and ashamed. And then it struck her. How quickly we've changed. What once felt like choice, pride, self, now seemed garish. How easy it had become to be repelled by what was once so ordinary. The women were tourists, Japanese by the look of them. Clustering, fluttering, cameras poised like curious insects. One of the men stepped forward, an interpreter in uniform, blue suit, red tie, and the glinting winged eye pinned to his chest. His presence alone made her skin tighten. "They're asking," he said with a polite smile, "if they can take your picture." She lowered her face, shook her head. Her white wings veiled everything but a slip of skin, her mouth, her chin. Her gaze stayed on the bricks beneath her feet. She did not meet his eyes. She remembered the warnings. To be seen is to be penetrated. Aunt Lydia's voice echoed like a spell cast years ago. Modesty, invisibility, impenetrability. These were no longer virtues, but requirements. They had been taught to disappear by design. Offred was silent, her red-gloved hands tucked into her sleeves like secrets. Neither of them responded. The interpreter turned away, explaining briskly in staccato syllables, turning their silence into spectacle. She watched the tourist's feet, bright sandals, painted toenails, soft brushing of nylon. She remembered that scent, nail polish, the sting of acetone, the silky brush, the way toes felt inside shoes made only for show. Suddenly, she was hungry. But for what? Again, the interpreter tried. "Excuse me?" he said. And then the question, "Are you happy?" It was absurd. Their eyes leaned forward, hopeful and hungry for whatever performance might follow. Were they happy? Could they be? Offred said nothing. Silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. "Yes," she said finally, low and automatic. "We are very happy." Because what else was there to say? Chapter 6. The wall. They reach the place where the path splits. Offred pauses, pretending this moment is a decision. It never is. They always take the long way. She glances over, saying she wants to pass by the church, her voice faintly pious. The narrator agrees. They both know why. The sun is out. Clouds dot the sky like clipped cotton, shapeless sheep without heads. Their wings narrow their vision, tunnel it. To see the world requires effort, brief darts of the head up, sideways, back again. Sight comes in flashes. The world arrives in gasps. Just beyond and down the hill lies the river. There used to be bridges and dormitories with whimsical turrets, a boathouse where they kept the skulls once. She remembers the boys, bare-armed, bronzed, lifted into golden air as they rode toward victory. It's the beautiful things they remember. The mind makes its own sepia filter. She doesn't go that way anymore. Not across bridges, not down into the subway. There's a station just there, but it may as well be another world. They aren't allowed under the surface. Why would they be? From here to there, suspicion incarnate. The church is old, modest, centuries dormant now. A museum wrapped in reverence. Inside, paintings of austere men and women, hair bound, lips sealed. Outside, time-worn gravestones, skulls, angels, hourglasses, urns, symbols of dust and departure. These relics remain untouched. It is recent memory that offends the regime, not the past. Ovglin bows her head like always. The narrator watches, unsure, genuine grief or an actor's mask. She's suspicious of sincerity, even in herself. They're all curating some version of faith, some version of submission. This is survival. Then they turn, and there it is, the wall. Red brick, centuries old, its elegance corrupted. Now it bristles with barbed wire and broken glass. Tower lights glow balefully overhead. The gates are shut. No one exits that way, not unless forced. There are bodies. 6 men, dangling from hooks, necks snapped sideways, hands bound, white hoods like sackcloth halos. Their presence stains the day. They stop in unison, as expected. These are sanctioned glances. You're supposed to look. The display must be acknowledged. Each hook is a punctuation mark. Steel curves pressed into brick. Some hooks remain empty, waiting. But these 6 are occupied. The men sag under the weight of their own stillness. Under the hoods, outlines of faces just barely remain, like bruises beneath bandages. One cloth has bled through at the mouth. A red smile. Childish, grotesque. They're wearing lab coats. Doctors then. Once healers, once legal. Now criminals by decree of retrospect. Their crime, preserving choice in a world that outlawed it. They were betrayed, perhaps. A nurse's whispered accusation. A rival's self-preservation. The record keepers purge the files. But fear keeps secrets unearthed. Their bodies are not mourned, not publicly. They are meant to sow disgust, to draw hatred. But the narrator feels nothing of the sort. They feel nothing. Or rather, they feel too much to feel safely. Relief, perhaps, because none of them is Luke. He was not a doctor. He isn't. She corrects herself. She stares at the red mouth leaking through the linen. It reminds her of the tulips in Serena Joy's garden. Same hue, same depth, but no connection. The flowers do not grieve the men, and the wall does not sanctify the blooms. There is no poetry here. Each thing stands alone, valid, real, untouched by metaphor. Ovglin trembles beside her. Maybe she's crying. Maybe that's her performance. The narrator doesn't look, doesn't want to know. Her own hands are locked around the basket handle, white-knuckled. She offers nothing. This will become ordinary, Aunt Lydia had said. And it has. Chapter 7. Dear You. Night is hers, a brief possession. A stretch of time thin as silk, barely hers, and only if she lies still, doesn't breathe too loudly, doesn't move too much. In the darkness, thought becomes her rebellion. Stillness, her theater. The plaster eye watches from the ceiling. Curtains hush the window. Sheets tucked neat around her, like a body sealed in cotton obedience. But inside, her mind steps sideways, into old time. Moira appears first, smirking on the edge of a college bed. Dangly earring glinting, cigarette smudging gray arcs into the air. She's teasing, flinging insults and coats, dragging her out for beers, for air, for freedom. Her purple overalls were always a costume, armor made of color. "You're getting ashes in my bed," she'd protested. "If you'd made it, you wouldn't have that problem." Moira had snapped back. There were papers to write, textbooks flayed across the floor, open to half-read thoughts on psychology or date rape. The kind of subjects they could debate before the rules changed, before the world turned. Other memories swirl in: a park, a cold day, ducks on a lead gray pond, a child clutching breadcrumbs in her pocket, a mother's lie. A day for ducks becomes a day for flames. Women gathered, burning magazines. The fire danced, pages curled, opened mid-air, fragments of women's bodies flaring and falling like ash. One woman offered her a magazine. She threw it in. Her mother told her to. She watched it fly apart. And then the fragments blur. There are lost days. Needles, maybe. Pills. The sound of boiling surf, distant screaming. Maybe hers. No light, no sleep, just a slipping. They told her she was unfit, that the child was with people who were. They showed her a photo, a girl with pulled back hair, a quiet face beside a stranger's elbow. She's in good hands, they'd said. She looked like an angel, she thought. You've killed her, she said. What else could you say to a photograph? And now, in this bed, in the hush of night, she wraps herself in words, because it has to be a story. She needs it to be a story. That would mean an ending waits, that something real might follow after. If it's a story, then it's hers to tell. Even without pen or page, because writing is forbidden, she narrates it in her head, not to herself, but to someone. There is always someone. Dear you, she imagines saying, just you. No name. Naming is dangerous. Names give things power and reality. But the you she conjures could mean one person or many, a stranger or a crowd, an echo of love, or an imagined lifeline stretching out into the future. I'm not in immediate danger, she tells this ghost reader. I'll pretend you can hear me. She knows they can't, but she tells the story anyway. Chapter 8. Under his eye. The weather holds, golden, warm. It feels almost like June, the kind of day when, once, they would have worn sundresses and gone out for ice cream. But there are 3 new bodies on the wall. One hangs in a priest's vestments, black and too formal, as though even in death he was made to play a role. The other 2 wear guardian uniforms. Around their necks, purple placards, gender treachery. She imagines where they were found, perhaps in a barracks or a shared shower. It's hard to say. The red smiling snowman from before is gone. We should go back, she says to Offred. It's always her who says it. She suspects that, left unprovoked, Offred would stare forever. Mourning or gloating, it's never clear. Without a word, Offred turns, fluid as music box mechanics. Her motion irritates, too practiced, too precise. She walks like submission incarnate. The sun warms their backs as they leave the wall. A beautiful May day, Offred offers lightly. She waits for a reply. Yes, the narrator says. Praise be, she adds, out of habit. But Mayday. It's a distress call, isn't it? That much she remembers. Luke had explained the word once. French, from HANDMAID'S, help me. It had come up one morning with coffee and newspapers still in their bed. She clings to the memory, the way he spoke to her with certainty about something as small as language. She wishes she could look it up. But nothing can be looked up now. A small funeral procession comes into view, an econowife carrying a tiny black jar, flanked by 2 others. From the size of the jar, the child must have been very small, 2 or 3 months, too early to tell if it had been marked as human or unbaby. They stop to show respect, palms over hearts. The mourners return scowls. One spits. The econowives do not like them. The handmaids are a different kind of resentment. Later, back at the checkpoint, Offred parts with the familiar farewell. Under his eye. The narrator echoes it. There's a pause, just a breath, a hesitation, as though Offred wants to say something else. But then she walks away. receding like a reflection in a mirror she's stepping out of. In the driveway, Nick polishes the commander's car. She hears the whistle before she sees him, hears the scrape of cloth on chrome. "Nice walk," he says. She doesn't answer. Aunt Lydia's warning chimes in her head. They're not supposed to talk to you, but some of them will try. "Flesh is weak," she'd said. "All flesh is grass." The narrator had corrected her silently. "And boundaries are yours to set." In the garden, Serena Joy reclines in her chair. The tulips thrust up red and wide, no longer wine cups but chalices open and hungry. They will soon explode, their petals flung like shrapnel. Serena Joy doesn't speak, doesn't look. But she knows the narrator is there, knows it with a dense air of recognition, sour and silent. "It's not the husbands you should worry about," Aunt Lydia had said. "It's the wives." Serena Joy wasn't always her name. It had once been Pam, a woman who used to sing on television, then spoke on stages about women and homes and sanctity. She'd preached submission while building a career on rejecting it, a contradiction made sacred. Someone once tried to kill her, bomb her car. The world had burned hot then. Luke and she had watched from bed, amused, skeptical. But under the makeup and tears, Serena had always felt like a warning. And now she has no stage, no voice. Her sacrifice has become her sentence. Her silence isn't piety, it's bitterness fermented. Back inside, the kitchen smells of bread and yeast. Nostalgia swells, threatens. It smells of memory, of homes once hers, kitchens once filled with her own hands, her own child. But she shuts the feeling down. Rita slices carrots, thick winter ones, still bearded from storage. Her knife flashes, tempting. The narrator craves it, its sharpness, its certainty. Rita stands as the parcels are offered. She frowns, as she always does, yet peels back each wrapping with hungry interest. The narrator notes it. In this house, they all envy one another something. "They've got oranges," she says. Small triumph, small currency, a little sunlight to share. She offers the idea of oranges like a gift, delicate and hopeful, a token for favor. Yesterday, she saw them but didn't tell Rita. Rita had been sour, closed off. Today, she tries again, bargaining with poultry. The chicken is a compromise. Rita had wanted steak. She says nothing now, only grunts, non-committal. She undoes the string, peels back the glazed paper, pokes and prods the raw body like something already disappointing. It shivers with goosebumps, lifeless and exposed. "Bath day," Rita mutters, as if to the carcass more than to anyone in the room. Cora enters then, dust trailing behind her from some unseen task. Her voice perks up at the sight of the bird. Less scorn, more hunger. "A chicken," she says, almost delighted. But Rita dismisses it. "Scrawny," she replies, "though it'll have to do." The narrator offers an apology. There wasn't much else. It floats, unheard. Cora gives her a glance. For a flicker, the narrator hopes it means sympathy. But no. It's just food on Cora's mind. The only desire that still makes sense. She watches Cora briefly. There's youth in her still, caught in the late light like a memory. Traces of earrings remain, twin pocks in each ear. She was pretty, maybe, not too long ago. "Tall," says Rita, inspecting without permission. "But bony." Then, "You should speak up." Rita snaps, aiming now. Her eyes are on the narrator. "Not like you're common," she says. Meaning, this household is of status. Meaning, you are not. Her judgment is final. Rita washes her hands briskly, drying them on a dish towel patterned with blue stripes. The towel is ordinary. Too ordinary. It hits her like a tripwire. The towel, the motion, the banter. For a moment, everything aligns as it once was. The present flickers into the past. A kitchen like hers, like any, a life before. But normalcy like that cuts sharp, and she forces the thought down. The women talk now about her as though she's invisible. A bath must be done. Just so it gets done, Rita says. Not to her. About her. She gathers the basket and slips away. Past the ticking grandfather clock. Past stained glass light falling from the fanlight. Shards of purple and blue stretching across the floor. Her hands open into the sunlight like petals. Flowers of light bloom in her palms. And then they fade. Upstairs, she glances at herself in the warped mirror. Her face distorts in the curve of the glass. Ghost-like, pressurized. Then she sees him. A figure in the hallway, his back turned. A man. Her breath stills. It's the commander. He stands at the threshold of her room. Her room? As though caught between decision and disobedience. He isn't supposed to be there. He knows that. She knows that. But there he is, bathed in the room's glow, a silhouette halved by uncertainty. He hears her behind him, turns. For a heartbeat, they meet each other fully in this narrow hall. Then, wordlessly, he steps aside, moving on, his shoulders careful not to brush hers. And then, he's gone. But something has passed between them. A signal, like a flag spotted briefly over the rise of an unknown border. Is it a sign of aggression? A proposal? A warning? What in hell is he doing? She thinks. The moment hangs heavy. He shouldn't have been there. No one else saw. Was he in her room? She catches herself. Her room. She called it that. Chapter 9. The message behind the wall. Her room. Not entirely hers, but she claims a sliver of it anyway. A corner of time, a wedge of stillness, a fragment of control in a world where ownership is nothing but illusion. She waits. The room has become many things. Waiting room, sleeping room, a cell wrapped in floral curtains and beige conformity. Outside, sunlight slips westward across the sky. The air moves faintly. The curtains shiver like nerves. She tries not to remember, not to shape her days into stories. But memories rise like heat. There was someone here before her. Another woman. She chooses to believe that. Believes they're linked across time, companions in captivity. On the third day, with time to spend and nowhere to spend it, she began to explore. Not all at once, methodical, like rationing pleasure. She studied the plaster, ran fingers along the baseboards, examined the mattress under its crisp sheets. There were stains, old ones, faded traces of bodies once tangled, love, or at least a need for touch. She covered it again and lay down, imagining Luke beside her. But there was never enough room for him here. The room was stripped of danger and ornament. No chandelier to swing from, shatterproof glass. But still, hidden things remained. In the cupboard, low and in shadow, she found it. Words, scratched faintly into the wood, like a secret cast ashore. Nolit to bastardes carborundorum. The Latin meant nothing to her, but the message was everything. Writing, forbidden, meant for her, and she received it. She imagined the woman who left it, a shadow version of Moira, irreverent, clever, unbroken. She conjured freckles and bicycles and resilience. Maybe the woman was real. Maybe she was memory made flesh. It didn't matter. The connection gave her breath. It gave her something. She dared to ask Rita about the one who stayed before her. Just a question. Light, almost. Rita was wary, tight-lipped, but admitted there were others. Some didn't stay the full 2 years. Some didn't make it. The lively one, the narrator guessed. with freckles, a fiction she offered like bait. You knew her? Rita's tone stiffened. I heard she was here. Another fiction. Accepted. She didn't work out, Rita said. In what way? But no answer followed. The door to that story was closed, shut not with rage but with fear. Some truths are too sharp to be told. What you don't know won't hurt you, Rita said. But of course, it does. Chapter 10. Gaps between the stories. She hums to herself sometimes, mournful, weightless melodies. Fragments of songs that once filled pews and radio waves. Amazing grace, she mouths silently, misremembered words stitched together from forgotten Sundays. Those songs aren't sung aloud anymore. Words like free carry too much danger now. They're relics of rebellion, of forbidden past. Loneliness echoes too, in borrowed verses from her mother's old cassette tapes. Ones she used to hear through laughter, through wine, through rooms now silenced by order. She doesn't sing much. It hurts. And in this house, music lives only in the hum of a kitchen knife or the ghost of Serena's voice, played low and secret, wrapped in distant glory and unraveling lace. The warmth builds outside. These old houses hoard heat. The air turns stale. Summer uniforms wait in the wardrobe, cotton instead of synthetics, though even that promise sweats under regulation. Aunt Lydia used to talk of women, sunning their bare shoulders, oiling their skin like meat, baring legs without shame. Such things, she'd whisper, too filthy to name. The goal had been to remove those things, to press life into form. But even she, once, had cried before the girls, sunlight exposing her failures, desperation trembling in her voice. Then Moira appears in memory, denim jacket falling, lighting a cigarette with someone else's matches. She made the world funny when it wasn't. An under-whore party, she called it. Laughable defiance in lace and wires. She was heat and noise and bad ideas you'd follow just to feel alive. The narrator had laughed too. But now, even that seems distant, because they lived as usual. That's the part that burns. Even as stories crept into the papers, violence at the edges, women disappearing, bodies found, those were other women, other men, not theirs. They existed in margins, believing themselves safe in the white spaces between the words. That, too, was a story. Downstairs, the car starts. In a quiet place like this, the sound is sharp. She moves to the narrow window seat, cushion hard beneath her. Faith. It reads in pale thread. A word left behind, forgotten, or hidden in plain sight. It's the only thing they've given her to read. She presses her head to the glass. Nick appears first, still, stiff, formal. Then, the commander. No hat. Not formal enough to pretend. His silver hair catches light. She watches him move like a thought she'd rather not have. If she could throw something, she might. She almost smiles at the idea. She remembers throwing water bombs with Moira, paper bags, laughter, boys reaching for laddered underwear. He disappears into the car. Nick closes the door. The vehicle recedes down the driveway and slips behind the hedge. Gone. She ought to hate him. She knows that. But what she feels doesn't sit neatly in the hand. It isn't rage. It isn't forgiveness. It isn't love. But it is something. Something harder to name.